I'm gonna call us to order at 5:08. I'm sorry, we're a little late. Once again, not last call but call for requests to speak, if you wish to do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and take roll then. Terry Andrews.
Here.
Jason Capel.
Here.
Kate Clark. Here. Betsy Kahn, I'm here. Gwen McMullins, we knew would not be here today. She is traveling. Yes. Lady, your microphone. Is it? All right. Item 3. Does anybody up here need to make any change to the agenda in terms of deleting, reordering, continuing, or making additions?
I'd just like to see if maybe you could move item 15 in front of, to move as much stuff before closed session as possible.
Okay.
Obviously the resolution has to, and the reporting out has to be at the end. But I think if we could move everything that's not absolutely essential post-closed session to the beginning, that would be good.
Would it be okay to put it right before the closed session? Or is there somewhere else?
No, I don't think it's, I mean, typically reports go together, so it could go with the support groups or right before closed session.
It's not that critical. I guess the only reason I would say put it before closed session is that there may be things that come up during the rest of the meeting that people may feel like they want to comment on, so I'll put it before 11. Okay. Highland Point of Order, do we need to have a motion to change the agenda?
I believe so. No? Okay.
Okay, so then we consider it adopted as is. Anybody else have any? Okay. All right, we're up to number 4. Mark.
Mark Mariska. So last Monday at the meeting towards the end, the former trustee, Ira, spoke about a bunch of things, but in there he just started to get to, looked and said, "Oh, Mark Mariska, you're still here," and was just getting ready to say something, and then ended up finishing his speech. And so after the meeting, I went up to him and came up here, put my hand out to want to apologize and see what was going on. And the reason I say that is a few people asked me later on after the meeting, you know, Ira really looked irate at you. And I said, well, no, so I want to clear the record. He was actually very respectful when he said he did not want to accept my apology. He just said that I've been lying out there in the community to him. And so what I want to say to the board, if I've ever said anything here at this podium, or if you think I've said something outside of this venue that might have been attacking the trustees or something along those lines, whether individually or as a group, I truly apologize for that. Not that I think that occurred, but you know, I don't want people to think that Ira was in a sense really, and he was very upset at me, obviously, but he did it in what I thought was a respectful way of saying, no, I don't want to talk to you. I'm just really mad at you, and this is not the time to even think about accepting an apology. And so there were a couple of people, as I said, asked me about that. So I do want to publicly just apologize for anything maybe I might have said at this board meeting that was not accurate, and hope that all of the things I say going forward should be, and if not, please, as you would with anybody else, I hope, call us out on it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. Gronemeyer.
past while I was in Texas, so wasn't present at the meeting, that I assume was drafted by council, but I don't know, that purports to respond to a cease and desist letter. And I want to discuss the inadequacy of that letter, its basic incompetency of that letter, and the failures involved in that letter that I would urge the board things to think about and address. I've handed out the annotated copy of Government Code Section 54960.2, which is part of the Brown Act. And the cease and desist letters are part of the statutory framework of the Brown Act. Cease and desist demands and cease and desist responses. And they are addressed in this particular section that I've handed out to you. And I've highlighted some important portions of them in what I'm handing out. Anytime one in the law starts looking at compliance and non-compliance with statutory provisions, you have to begin with the language of the statute, and it's important to look at that and understand it. And what the board passed last time was a resolution that purports to be a response to a Director Catay's cease and desist letters. And I intend in this and in subsequent remarks to, as time allows, to develop the inadequacy of that response. So if you go to down towards the bottom of page 1, where I've emphasized section C1 provides what has to be in an effective letter that is responds to a cease and desist letter. Minnie Catay submitted 3 cease and desist letters, and what is required is a resolution which is addressed to the person who submitted the cease and desist letters, and it has to be substantially in the form that is set out. Now you should look at your resolution, and I assume none of you are attorneys drafting that resolution, but you should look at that resolution to examine whether it complies with these statutory requirements, because it doesn't. And I'll address further that in the next portion, next session that I respond to. Thank you.
Is it okay if I ask a question to our legal in response to that? Just clarification.
To Kristen.
Clarifying questions are allowed.
To our attorneys.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I mean, it seems as though the point is that the resolution that that was passed last week was in direct response to the cease and desist letters. Is that the case or the intent?
No. Thank you, Jason. Okay, that's all of the requests that I had for public comment on item number 4. So we're moving forward to number 5. Mark, you had public comment on that, but aren't you in fact delivering the report?
Yeah, that's really what we're doing.
Okay, so it's time for 5.
So the Friends will go first.
Okay.
I'm Mark Mariscal, president of the Friends of the Altadena Library. And so this past weekend, the Friends were part of, as the library district has been for years, with Christmas Tree Lane Association. And you know, there are thousands of people here, and we had a great time. The Friends actually sold about $850, I think it was, somewhere around there. And that was from some T-shirts and lots of books and lots of books. And as Terry told me, and I know Jason had a bag, maybe some of you out in the audience, we did $1 a bag at the very end. But it was really nice to see a lot of people up there. And I went up on the stage and spoke briefly, and actually asked the crowd how many people were not from Altadena. And I was surprised at the noise I heard from the people that were not from Altadena. But we know there were a lot of Altadenians here, because we saw a lot of them at the booth, a lot of people that came in to thank us. So Granny and Nina, who are working the cashiers. But it's our annual time, half a year, to present a check. And so I was hoping we'd have a couple more members here. Right now, the only two Friends board members that we have, Granny and me. And so we will come up if we can. And Michaela, well, we'll come to you then. We'll come over to you, but we want to take a picture. And so, where's Michaela? Oh, she's right there.
Granny, this is my first
Come on,
meeting. I can get
Granny.
a picture with you?
Granny, you need to be in our picture.
Go do your job.
So anyway, we're here to give you a check for $11,000.
You don't have one of those big ones like they do on.
Well, she does, I mean, actually, we do at times take a blank thing and then she blows it up and does it, but
That's a.
Chloe can do it.
happy you got the check.
Oh.
But, we'll just come right back here.
Okay.
Does this work? Come on, trustees. You gotta do it a second time anyway. How's that?
Zoom in
Come
on
on
it.
in. Come on in. Does that work?
Can't zoom too much. It is an iPhone.
Alright, ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, start.
Thank you.
Thank you to the Friends.
So I'll say we have, we're doing our membership drive right now. So those of you that have been members, and it's renewal time, so make sure you go in and do $10 or $25. Jason, if you redo it, I think you actually did it in October, or September, October, so you don't have to renew for 2019. Because anybody that did it from somewhere in the middle of September forward, we credit you through 2019. But we will send emails out next time, so we didn't do it. We've come up with a better system on making sure the recognition is there right away. And anybody else, if you're not a member and you would like to, we have envelopes upstairs where the books are for sale, right there where the Friends book area is. So that's it from the Friends, and now we have the Foundation.
Just about to ask if we could walk over with this. Thank you. First of all, I'm Bridget Brewster, and I'm a member of the Foundation Board. This is such an exciting moment to actually get to give something positive. We have a check for $5,000. Cynthia normally would be here, but at the last minute she wasn't able to make it, so somehow this landed on my lap. The check, we're asking that the gift be used for literacy programs. And I do want the other board members to at least introduce themselves if they would.
Oh,
Hi, Cynthia Comanchek. Hi, Lola Warlick Bryant.
Mark Mariscal?
Laura Clark.
We're such a new group because they've really been working at expanding the Foundation Board. While we're new, we do want to take a moment to acknowledge Gwen McMullen's contribution. She is the longest serving member on the Foundation Board, and her term ends this month. She's probably quite relieved. But her work will be missed, but she will continue to serve in a more important capacity, possibly. And hopefully at the next meeting when she's here, we could publicly recognize her contributions and thank her. So, without further ado, here is your check.
Let's go back.
come on back.
Still got Michaela.
Now we have a bigger group.
Bigger group this time.
We need to.
Go right here. Can we all fit?
You shorties can move.
There's somebody shorter than I am. I'm so
That's why we have a stage.
Okay. Ready?
Okay, we are down to number 6. And I'm gonna ask a tiny bit of indulgence because Lumpkin, I just wanna explain to folks who are here with us tonight. This is the first time we've had a meeting in December. It was, we learned along the way that even though it had been traditional not to have a December meeting, that it is indeed part of Ed Code that we do need to meet every calendar month of the year. And because December is the way it is, you might have noticed if you're a regular around here that we were just here like 2 weeks ago and then 1 week ago, and here we are again. And so that put an extreme time crunch on the staff to get the packet ready. And so it was posted just this afternoon. And I was working with my middle schoolers all day and I had a staff meeting after work. So I would love like 2 minutes to just look at the financial reports before we talk about them. So if that's okay, I'm not gonna set myself a timer, but I won't be long. So anybody else who needs to look, take a minute. I do believe there's a copy in the back as well if anybody else wants to have a look. Okay, y'all ready to move forward with this one? I do have a couple questions, but Nicole, maybe you could summarize for us your summary.
So nothing out of the ordinary for October financials. I did add a couple of notes to this report. One is that negative net income is not unusual. The financials don't reflect a net excess until after January 2019, after we receive our first property tax installment. My other note is about the mid-year budget adjustment. Any expenditures that are currently over 25% of the budget will be reviewed and addressed then, and we're hoping to do that next month.
I was just wondering, on the donations and grants line, an undesignated, maybe we've talked about this and I don't remember what it is, but there's an undesignated donation or grant that was $6,300. That just looks wonderful, but I just wonder if you know off the top of your head what that is.
I don't. Generally what goes into undesignated is anytime a patron makes a donation or an organization makes a donation and they don't specify exactly where they need it to go.
Okay.
I can definitely look to see what I have in that account.
Yeah, it was just a little bright spot there that I wondered about. Any other questions from us for Nicole?
So, I know Nicole, you referenced the next month, the issue of this 25%. So you'll have like a more detailed report specifically on some line items on that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Two quick questions. When does our property tax assessment come in? Is that beginning of January or end of January?
So people pay in December, I believe, so it's usually towards the end of January by the time the county sorts all that out, and then again, I believe it's in April, so we get it kind of towards the end of May.
Okay. And when we're looking at recommended changes for the mid-year budget adjustment, any expenditures over 25% get automatically considered, but is that also true where there's expenditures that are under what we've anticipated?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments before we receive and file these? Okay, may I have a motion that we receive and file the financial reports?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Gronemeyer, I believe you wanted to speak to number 7,
Yes.
the consent calendar?
Yes, Dale Gronemer again, and I wanted to address the minutes of not the past meeting when I wasn't present, but rather the meeting prior to that where I was present. And surprisingly, the minutes do not reflect that I made any comments or any contribution to the meeting. And all of you who have been attending these meetings must know that that really defies logic, doesn't it? However, I want to clarify that, in fact, I did attend the meeting.
I'm sorry, sir, you're talking about November 26th, is that the one?
Yes.
Our last regular meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
I did attend the meeting, and I did not participate, and I want to sort of explain why. I didn't participate in it because my role here has been primarily as a lawyer, advocating for my client, Mindy Katay, and we have reached a tentative settlement that the board is maybe considering further tonight, in which the district will pay Director Katay some money, and she will move on, and it contains a bar on future employment. And because my work, I believed at the time, had been completed as a lawyer representing Mindy, I decided it did not make sense to continue to hammer away at what I view as the problems of the board. Now, I may have been premature in that because it appears, from what I am told, that everybody required to sign off on it, which includes all of the trustees and the past trustee, John McDonald, that Mr. McDonald is not agreeing to sign the settlement. That may be why the board is tonight, has this matter on its agenda. I don't know. They'll discuss it. I've been told that the insurance policy has a reservation of rights, that if Mr. McDonald does not sign, he would be cut loose, and we would continue the lawsuit against him, but proceed in settlement with the district. So hopefully, this will be my last time speaking, but I wanted to say that the reason I'm raising the issue that I am raising is because I didn't take this case only because because I wanted to represent Mindy, and I believe in her cause, but because I also believe in the library and believe that you were not having good governance, and that good governance needed to be addressed. And I believe it now. It has been largely addressed, but there is this lingering issue that I began to discuss and will continue to discuss the next time I'm up here, which is not designed in any way to advance Mindy's cause, because that is resolved, but to ask you to address what I believe is an important issue of your governance. Thank you.
Thank you. So, here we are at number 7, the consent calendar. Jason, I think you had something you wanted to maybe remove to be able to ask a question.
No, I just had a comment when we get to it on one of the pieces of the departmental report.
Okay, if y'all don't mind, once again, I would love like 1 minute to look through these reports so that I too might be able to speak intelligently about them if necessary. So talk amongst yourselves for a sec, and we'll be right back. Jason, which part, I think what we should do is just take out the part that you wanna ask a question about. Approve the rest of the consent calendar, and then we can have the discussion about the part that you had a question about, so.
Yeah, no, I just had 2 comments under the programming section on, let's see, pages 24 and 27.
Okay, so that would be in number 3. So we'll just pull number 3 out of the consent calendar for now. And go ahead and, yeah. So then let's go ahead and vote on the rest of the consent calendar, and then we'll have that. Okay, so I am going to ask for a motion that we approve the consent calendar with the exception of number 3, which we'll discuss separately. Can I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Katie, and then second?
I second that.
Okay. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So, that means we're gonna just move that little number 3 down to item number 8, so go to town, whatever.
So just a couple of questions, I guess, for the staff. Just noticing some of the great things that are in here. So there's a reference to, we were looking into a career online high school to assist, community members in getting their diplomas, but frankly, we just don't have the money to staff it. So I'm just wondering if we've looked at any grants as a way to possibly still move forward with that. And then the second question regarding the Children's Board report, I think it's really great, this new program with kind of these mini libraries that we're putting out in the community. I guess my only follow-up question on that is, there's also this kind of nationwide mini libraries. I mean, we've seen them, they're all over our communities. I didn't know if there might be a way to kind of tap into that network as well as a way to expand. So those are my 2 questions.
Okay, so, go ahead, Stella, if you can.
So I can address both of those. So regarding the Career Online High School, this was actually a grant opportunity through the California State Library. And so just to explain how this works is typically when the California State Library has a grant opportunity for libraries in California, what they'll do is they'll first announce that this is coming down the pike, and then they'll create some sort of webinar so that librarians can then view the webinar to determine if they even want to pursue that grant opportunity. So I asked Katie to view the webinar to see if this would be a good fit for us. While it's definitely an important program, there is also a financial matching component to it, which, knowing how much we need to work on the facilities at this point in time, I decided that we should table this. Should this grant opportunity occur next year, then hopefully we'll look at it again. Also, the turnaround time between when the webinar was presented and when we would have to really pull our grant together was kind of quick timing, and so we just felt like it wasn't the best fit for us to hurry and rush something through this year. Also, again, knowing what we have to look at with our facilities, which of course will be evaluated with our mid-year adjustment.
Okay, thank you.
And then the deposit library that our children's librarian Christina referred to in her report. So this is, yes, in a sense, our own little free library that we're trying to do with different institutions. We've done this in the past, sometimes as one-off situations. Currently, there's a local Pasadena museum that on a quarterly basis, they'll ask us if we have any books that we can donate, which we do, which is discards from our collection that are in good condition. The Little Free Library movement is very active in the United States. We haven't looked at in terms of partnering per se with the Little Free Libraries as a library, but we can evaluate that.
Okay.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, thank you.
Oh, may I also add, Kylan reminded me too, we do, some of our adult services staff do go around Altadena and populate the Little Free Libraries that they see on occasion, so.
Awesome.
May I comment?
Yes.
As a curator of a Little Free Library myself, I would love to see, as Jason mentioned, a program where folks that had one knew where they could get some books. We're always struggling to get stuff from our private collection in there. So I think there's really an opportunity for that, especially if they were to have a little sign or a sticker or something that could be put on the side of the library that said partnering with the Altadena Library for, you know, whatever the message might be. But I'd certainly endorse that. I don't know how you would proceed, except if you go knocking on the doors in neighborhoods where you see one and ask them if they'd be interested in that kind of a thing. But just an idea, I thought I'd throw that out there.
There is precedent for that. I do know that some communities, and I did look into this a while back, they work with their friends group so that the friends can then acquire the materials to provide, so let's say it's somebody's house, or sometimes this has been done in front of elementary schools. So like the friends group then provides the materials, not necessarily building the free library box, but they provide the materials, and then the library itself then is the one that again populates the free library, so that in a sense you're kind of, yes, curating it for whatever, whether it's a house or a school or whatever. So.
And I'm sure a lot of us have noticed the signs over in Sierra Madre that says "Love My Library" with a big heart, and you see them all over town. I've always thought that there might be a tie-in there as well for some signage that just gets our library name out there. So I'll stop now so I don't get roped into the committee right away. Still have an idea.
I'd just add one thing, which is, I drive every day, twice a day, past the clinic on Lake, it's technically in Pasadena, but the one that's between Woodbury and Washington, I guess. I'm just imagining mothers and fathers with little children sitting waiting for. Actually, it's the city of Pasadena clinic, the one on the west side of the street. But Chap Care would be another. I mean, I just think anywhere where people are having to wait for service with little kids, especially if it's a healthcare situation, which kind of adds to the stress anyway. That would just, I'm just putting that out there in case nobody's thought of putting box books there. That would be great. Mark, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask for public comment on this item, so.
No, I just brought it up,
Yeah.
because you guys brought this thing out and started talking about it. I just wanted to remind, especially the new trustees, the two new trustees seated, that the Library Foundation, and we still have some of our foundation board members here, you know, we work very closely with the library director, that if there is a grant opportunity, what Stella just told you about was the state grant. You know, it's an internal from the state librarian's office. But when there's another opportunity, so if Katie actually came to Stella and said, you know, we need 15,000, I don't know what the number was, but we need 15,000, and maybe there's a couple places, because right now we can submit grant applications for up to a certain amount, especially for education, to the Pasadena Community Foundation. And so if there is something that matches, you know, we'll do it through the foundation, serve as the sort of executor, and then the library staff would do it. So that's one way. The other thing with and I saw Joy and Granny raised her hand. I got to tell you that there's no question that the Friends, I think we've already had some of the small libraries, community libraries, come and ask, can they have some books? And we've given it to them before, right, Joy? And so, no problem, Terry, we would be happy to do that. We get some very good fiction, hardback and paperback, but some very good books that can be there. And I will say this, the library staff was looking into this, about 6 or 8 months ago, because the Rotary Club was thinking about, as a community service project, maybe building some. And so they were looking into it, and there's still a little bit of discussion, so maybe a combination of the Friends with books, the Rotary with some building, and maybe even the foundation with a program grant or something. I mean, we might be able to do some enhanced areas within the library district. And when we get to item 10 or 11 or 14 or wherever it says that there might be an interim director, Stella and I and Cynthia could probably sit down with he or she.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing? In response to your question, Jason, about Career Online High School, I forgot to also mention the component that Katie wrote about staffing is that this program stipulates that you must have a staff person, I think it was about 8 hours per week that specifically works on this project. So that's why we also just, in the turnaround time, just, not this year.
I think we're done. Do we need to have a motion to now accept the number 3 that we removed from the consent calendar?
I mean, in my opinion, reports are information.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. All right, then we'll move to number 9, and I believe Mark
I'll pass.
Lopez. Okay. So the agenda item of number 9, old business, is an update from the ad hoc subcommittee to fill the interim district director position. That item is going to be considered in our closed session, so I'm just gonna defer, the report that will be available when we're ready to give it will come out at that time. Will come out of the closed session, so I think we're gonna call that one done for now, and then we'll bring it back again when we come out of our closed session. So I think that brings us to number 10. Nobody has anything to say about that one. Oh wait, Mark, you do.
I don't need you for I'll pass on the 10A, we'll wait to see how the other thing.
Okay, all right. Then it's time for the ceremony.
So, just so the public is aware, we did receive the official county certification, and all 4 of the newly elected Board of Trustee members did come in on Friday at various times to do their official swearing in and get notarized by Kylan, who is our on-staff notary. What we're going to do right now, though, is for all of you is to have just a group ceremonial swearing in.
Can I just add that it was legally required to have it on Friday, that's why we did it that way.
So I don't know if you all want to stand or how we want to do this, say. So basically, because each individual here did already take their oath of office, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pose the oath to them as a question. I'll read it, and then they will presumably announce in the affirmative. Okay. So, do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that you take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which you're about to enter?
I do.
I do. I do.
Congratulations.
Okay, we are up to number 10. So is it not the case, Quinlan, that we would take nominations and?
Well, I know we had discussed how we were gonna do this. I'm just going with what has been done previously. I think you guys are welcome to handle it a different way and maybe move that, and go and do all that, but, we discussed it and we just decided to give, sorry. We just decided to provide you with the ballots, and then, I can read, who votes for who, and then.
Okay, well.
But I think if you have the proper
That's what I
way.
checked.
Okay.
Just because I knew this would be the one time that I have, something I haven't done yet. So according to Roberts, what we do is I ask for nominations So, just for all of you who may not have been around for this part in the past, we have two officers on this board, president and secretary. I'm currently the president when McMullins is currently the secretary. The president does everything you see me do and lots of things you don't see me do. And the secretary presides in the absence of the president. That's pretty much what our bylaws say about our officers. So I would prefer to go by this, which says that I call for nominations from the floor by saying nominations are now in order for the office of the president, and then anyone can announce a nomination. So I call for nominations of the president.
I nominate Betsy Dawn.
I nominate Terry Andrews. Jason, got any nominations?
No pressure. Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Sure, please.
Who fills in for the secretary when the secretary is not here?
Well, the secretary doesn't take the minutes,
Oh,
or,
gotcha.
no, Kylan takes the minutes. So, the secretary actually doesn't really have an official role except to preside in the absence of the president.
Like a vice president.
Yeah. I mean, we have had, right, when I first started, we did have a case where we had no officers, and then we just kind of drew straws about who would preside. So.
The secretary in the past, the only other thing that I know of is that they've taken notes during closed session. But we have the notebook there, and it is pretty much what you see in the minutes. Went into closed session at this time, came out at this time. I mean, there's no, notes and minutes of closed session necessarily, so that's the only other thing. But Mark may have something else.
Go right.
Mark Mariscal, so on 10B. Yeah, I think what Kylan just said was one of the things I'd say. You have Christine here too, and I think you might want to pick that brain. But the secretary, so you got to remember, you're a corporation, right? You're a government entity that's I think a public benefit corporation or something. You have a legal status, and so you have to have two officers that can legally sign documents. And so the secretary also serves as that second signature. And so usually also when you have two board members in that are on your check signing process, it's usually the president and the secretary. Doesn't have to be, but it usually is the president and the secretary. And so I think those are the important points besides what Kylan talked about for closed session, because you are required to keep notes in a closed session that then could be, you might refer back to or something. So you're supposed to have that. Whether it's been going on for the last few years, I know in my years, we had a book that was kept, and I think the secretary did that then. So it is a real important position. But if they're missing at a meeting, just like if the president's missing or a trustee's missing, because when you're all up here, all five of you really just have a single vote. It's just that the president and the secretary have some additional duties in the bylaws.
And just to add to that, if the president gives up the chair to make a motion or argue in favor of a motion, then the secretary presides during that meeting. So the secretary will also fill in the course of the meeting if for some reason the president needs to vacate the chair.
Your bylaws are very specific as to the role of the secretary, and so I think there were 5 specific duties, most of which you guys have covered, except just to correct Mark, you guys don't maintain minutes of your closed session, it's not required by law, and so that one element of their role isn't necessarily fulfilled now, and then the maintaining of minutes of regular board meetings, you guys don't do that. The secretary doesn't do that, Kylan does that, so those 2 things are a little bit different. You can change your bylaws to reflect that eventually, but there are very specific duties of the secretary in the bylaws.
Thank you, Christine. So we have 2 nominees on the table.
Well, given that you've nominated Carrie, I'll withdraw my nomination. It's not a personal slight.
Oh, not,
Yeah.
on the contrary. Okay, last call for nominations. Okay.
I mean, I see no reason. I mean, I don't know if this is appropriate to ask it this way, but I mean, is there any reason to think that Gwen would not want to remain secretary?
Let's deal with president first, and then
Okay.
we can deal with secretary. 'Cause
Okay.
that, we do them one, I think we're gonna
Alright.
do them one at a time.
Alright.
So, I guess I'm gonna ask for a vote of all in favor of our single solitary nominee for president and Terry Andrews to raise your hand and say aye.
Do I vote on this too?
You're gonna be outvoted. Aye.
I am jumping up and down, clapping my hands.
Can we do a ceremonial passing of the Robert Rules of Order summary book to?
What I do it slow. Dun, 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 dun. And technically,
Well, we don't have to change seats though, do we?
No.
Okay, good. Can you give me a minute to read this? Right back to you. Well.
Maybe for Christmas you'll get the full annotated Robert's Rules of Order.
the unabridged.
Or the
Yeah.
cliff notes.
Yeah.
Can I just tell you that I did talk to Gwen before she went on her trip, because you'll see later in our agenda, we are also talking about committees, and, you know, I just wanted to be able to convey whatever she might, you know, be interested in or whatever, so that we didn't have to hold up that agenda item until she returned. And I can say pretty confidently that she would not cry if she were not secretary. Don't think so.
So I guess we are now asking for nominees for the secretary position then. Do we have any nominees for that?
I nominate Katie Clark.
Any others? Well, then I guess it's time for a vote on that. And so Katie Clark is up for nomination for secretary. And can I get a vote, please? All in favor say aye.
And raise your hand.
Aye.
And raise your hand.
Awesome.
All right, congratulations. It's awkward to be doing this all of a sudden, I can tell you that. So now that the election of officers is finished, we're on to item C.
Can I just say, would you like me to continue to manage the public comment for you?
Would you mind just for the rest of the meeting?
I
doing
do
that?
not mind at all, and let me just tell you, there's no requests for anything on number 10.
Okay. Great. So,
Oh, wait, sorry, Mark, I thought you waived number 10, but it
No,
was,
I said 10A, but the rest
10A.
probably, yeah. Mark Mariscal, 10C. So I just want to share with trustees that I would think all four of you were not here at the time, but the salary schedule that's in this document was a major issue with the last director. And really, I thought, caused the downfall of Mindy. So I want to make sure you truly understand how the salary schedule works. I know at least one of you have done a lot of public work, so you understand that. I don't really know about the rest, although I know Jason, but I think all of you know how most public entities work with salary steps. And so you hire somebody on the first step, and regardless of the cost of living increase that the entity, the government entity gives every year, the employee at their anniversary date gets to go up. So if you have any questions on salaries, really ask your staff, because this is really where there was some tug of war, I believe, between the trustees and the director. One of the areas, I mean, there could have been many more things, but it was one of the areas. And I will say that it's a nice thing that you understand really on 10D, the minimum wage, or 10E, wherever you get to minimum wage, but the idea being, or is it this one now, 10C?
that's what you're speaking to.
I'm trying to keep track of all these things. But I will just say this, it doesn't mean you have to stop at minimum wage. You could always go to $12.25 or $12.50 or $13, or, you know, You can always do that in your budget for next year and go ahead of time and not wait till the middle of the year for your page classification. I think that's the only position that is minimum wage. Thank you.
I know just several months ago, the county adopted its own minimum wage for unincorporated areas. Does anybody know offhand what that schedule is?
I suggested let Ms. Sella do the report.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm gonna let Nicole speak to this because she actually is the staff member who prepares the paperwork here for this particular item. But in general, just to speak to Mark's point, I know that looking at our overall step system is something we wanna do. I know in previous places that I've been employed, you have a step and grade system, but it is much more extensive so that you're not capped out after just a couple of years.
Okay, so I'm just gonna read this really quick because it is a very short report. So effective January 1st, 2019, the minimum wage in California will increase to $12 per hour from $11 per hour. Based on this new rate, the district is required to increase the wage rate for all steps of the page classification. To meet state minimum wage increase, the step 1 rate will increase to $12 per hour. Each subsequent step of the page classification will increase 5%. I've attached the revised salary schedule for fiscal year 18-19, which includes the minimum wage increase requirement. The fiscal impact of this change affects 2 district employees that fall under the page classification. Both employees will receive an increase in pay on January 1st, 2019. The approximate impact to the salaries budget is $632. So we do follow the minimum wage requirement for Los Angeles County for companies that have 25 or more employees.
So as an informational item, then there's no action required by the board on this? Okay. Any questions in from any other members?
Estelle, you mentioned this is something that still is under review or something we want to look at. Is that something you're looking at for the mid-year review or for next fiscal year budget?
It would not be for the mid-year review because it's gonna be pretty expensive, not expensive, extensive. Also, what would probably come into play would also be just looking at the naming of some of our classifications. So it's a document that's gonna take a bit of work.
Got it.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. So ready to move on to number D then, and that would be a presentation about the financial report. And I'm looking for Paul, is he here?
So I have, sorry, did I turn this up? So, if you look to page 35, unfortunately, we're having to, table this item until January. This morning, Paul, our CPA, reached out to the auditor to see if the auditor would also attend tonight's meeting. The auditor, lives in San Diego County, so understandably, he was not able to come here tonight, with such a short notice. So the auditor did ask if we could move this to the January, agenda, so.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I apologize, I didn't see that last page.
That's all right.
Do we need a motion then, or to table this until the next meeting? Okay, can I get a motion for that, and then we're gonna table this final, or this draft of the report to the next meeting?
So,
Okay. Got a motion?
Second.
Second. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Can I ask a quick question
Sure.
before we vote? Sorry. When we get, will we get a full report from them? Or is it, or like, is there gonna be more documentation forthcoming
yes,
before?
yeah, they
Okay.
did create like a report and then a letter of introduction to the report.
Okay, and so that will be included obviously in the board packet next month,
Yes.
but we'll have that presumably, do we have a timeline on that? Well, no, I know before the day of, but I mean, is that ready to go now? do they have that completed now because it was supposed to be here today, or not?
We do not have the final report yet.
Okay, cool, thank you.
So a natural follow-up question to that would be,
When?
because that might take some time for us to absorb, when it's ready, is that something we can get our hands on in advance of the packet, or how would that work?
I'm gonna defer to Christine because I know there's a component of the report that also involves BB&K's reporting. That a letter that BB&K had to submit to the auditors, so, or maybe that's a question for Ruben then.
So I think Terry's question was, I can answer both, but I think Terry's question was whether or not you guys get a copy of it before the agenda packet comes out, and the answer to that would be no, you would get it when the agenda packet comes out, or as the agenda packet is distributed. Well, as soon as it's available to the public, it can be available to you. So it can be available to you ahead of the agenda packet as long as it's posted on the website and available to the public at the same time.
Okay, thanks.
Probably answer that question.
And then, as I recall, I'm sorry, Christine, keep going.
And then I can talk to Stella about it. It sounds as if she's waiting for something from us in order to complete the report. Is that what you mean?
I think that Ruben was gonna have the letter that BB&K submitted. There's maybe some editing that needs to be done to the letter.
I'll follow up on that and get it to you.
Then I'd like to make a subsidiary motion that we post the report on the website and make it publicly available as soon as that's possible. However, that coincides with the timeline of the board package.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded then to have that report available as soon as possible, basically, and on the website as well, so it meets all the legal requirements. So, any other comments, conversation? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Right.
So just point of order, so coming back to the main motion, which was the motion to postpone to postpone this item until the January meeting, that was moved and seconded, but I don't believe we voted on it because I interrupted.
Okay. No, my apologies, I thought we did, but let's do it again. All in favor for that, then, to table the presentation until the January 28th meeting, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're moving on now to item E, committees, constitution, and membership. I don't know how broadly we are talking about this particular one. I know I had a question, or I wanted to get on the agenda last time to revisit the facilities committee and also look at a way possibly to link the activities of the Friends and the Foundation to the facilities committee so that they can, both parties can get an understanding of what money is available for the different projects, and then conversely, what the different projects are for prioritization. So my idea on all this was simply to, in the beginning anyway, to have a liaison, a board liaison that could function in both of those worlds, perhaps two, I'm not sure, and be able to help coordinate projects with funding in a very informal way, if you will, just to make sure that both parties are talking. I frankly don't know exactly how your facilities committee has worked in the past, so maybe, Stella, a good starting point would be how has it worked before, and who's been on the committee, et cetera.
So currently, we have the committee composed of Jonathan, Felipe, and Christopher. And then, of course, I have them reporting to me. And what they've been doing, Jonathan's here, they've been compiling essentially a list of everything that they see that we need between the two facilities. And again, Christopher being our IT manager, so I also want us to understand that this also includes other things such as webcams, you know. So it's not just strictly, we're not just strictly talking plumbing or so forth. And I think that where we're at is just waiting for then the board component to come aboard to that facilities committee.
So what Stella's talking about is a staff committee. The board has had in the past a committee of 2 board members. And that was actually called, I looked back in the minutes and it was called the building committee. But it was basically a facilities committee. and they would meet with the director and, maybe a facilities person on staff. I don't know too much about the past of that committee, but I do know that one did exist at one point in time fairly recently, maybe, a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I don't know. I'd have to look back at the exact minutes of when it was last mentioned. I know that they obviously have not met in a very long time, and there is obviously no current committee, but they never dissolved or anything like that, so I don't know how that works with continuing that business. But I just wanted to clarify the difference between the staff committee and
Is there a comment from other members of the board again?
I mean, I think considering that we are going to very quickly need to start working on an overall strategic plan, I think it's critical that the building committee play a significant role in that. So I don't know if it needs to be a formal resolution, but I think starting in the new year, that committee should begin to meet again.
So if I may, I think it might be helpful, just as a sort of general point of clarification. So as a board, we have two separate kinds of committees. We have standing committees and special committees. Standing committees are like our budget committee that's supposed to meet on a regular fixed schedule and has a fixed job, is composed of a certain set of members, and meets on a regular basis, just like this board does, subject to the Brown Act. And then there are special committees like the one that Betsy and Terry have that's, on the interim director search. So if we want to form a special committee, we certainly can do that. There are a number of hoops we have to jump through pursuant to the bylaws to do that. Certainly, we could also move to send a liaison to a staff committee, or we could vote to form a special committee, but either way, it would have to be a formal, that entity would have to be brought into existence formally, and it would have to have a defined remit and a period of time that it works through and a set number of people on it, that kind of thing.
So,
Yes.
so following on what Katie just said, I'm just kind of making a list of all the committees that we have had or might have. Facilities, either could be a revived standing committee, or what you just mentioned.
Or it could be a special committee, either way. I don't know if it was a standing committee before or not. Was it?
So, but I don't even.
Yeah, I don't know that they were properly noticing their meetings, but it definitely is not a committee that I would see having, it's not something short term. I mean, the building is gonna be here forever, hopefully, so
Yeah.
I would guess that it would be a standing.
And then budget is a standing committee. We have had a special committee to revise the bylaws that kind of has been dormant for a while, just because it was, bigger fish to fry for a while. We are going to need a special committee for a library director search. So
Yeah.
that's gonna be another one that we need.
And I'm gonna propose that we have a special committee for strategic planning that, kind of in the bylaws, there's a whole process by which you can reach out and involve members of the public and make it kind of a more inclusive thing, and I think that we should really do that for strategic planning as well. So that's, we can add that to your list.
And given all of this activity, because I can see this coming, I mean, there's a lot of committees that need to get revived, reformed. What I had in mind, frankly, with the facilities committee was more of a liaison position, where a board member could just sit in on a meeting and listen to what's going on and try to make sure that same board member is going to, and this is really what I had in mind, that same board member is also the liaison for the foundation, let's say, that there could be, what each group is talking about, and you could help get some coordination on what the end game should be. One of the things I feel strongly about, having looked at some of the old records we have and so on, is that we've been talking about the ADA requirements and improvements for this building for a long, long time, and it never quite seems to get baked into the plans. I don't think for anybody's fault, it just doesn't focus, from what I can tell, the historical record just isn't there. So what I had in mind really was more of a focusing device, not necessarily a committee that gets involved in decisions about what goes next, at least in the short term. And then later on, if we need to committeize that amongst all the other committees we're going to have to run and manage, then we can do that. So I guess, I don't know if a liaison takes a special, motion or whatever, that can just be somebody that's appointed to sit in on the meetings. But that was my idea at the end.
Regarding certainly I support you having a liaison to the foundation, but in regards to buildings projects, there are some new laws coming through, and Jonathan could speak better to this point. And I don't know, Jonathan, if you could get up and just kind of briefly explain what we're now looking at in terms of funding for facilities and where that money can come from.
Jonathan Revel, Buildings and Projects Manager, Altadena Library District. Hi. So the funding issues, everything is, probably someone that knows about unions and things like that would know that we are very cognizant about that. We have to do prevailing wage. And prevailing wage, especially with public works projects, is very important. New laws have come into effect starting since last year, but it's getting more effective 2019, whereas when we do any type of public project work, it has to be prevailing wage, especially with any public work that we need to done here at the library if we're using any type of public funds. Well, we also understand, we got some information from we got some information from BB&K. We wanted to find out about doing contracts and stuff like that, because we have to have contracts set up, because we want to be able, when we do a contract according to the standards that we need to do for any public work project, that there's some bond issues that need to be in there, certain things like, particularly if we do any change orders, that we have to do that. What we found out was that if any monies that we spend at any project whatsoever comes from any public money come there, that whole project automatically becomes a public project. That whole project is all prevailing wage. So when it comes to getting money from the foundation or things like that, they cannot directly give us money. We would come out from us, and it's all prevailing wage. So that I know that if the friends want to say they want to pay for this job, they can't, because if we start off with paying off with the monies of prevailing wage, paying off with public monies, it ends up being a prevailing wage job. And so it's very tight now. And go on.
Well, so I think what I hear you saying here, Jonathan, is that there's not that direct a link between what the foundation and the friends are giving us and how that gets funneled into your projects. Am I reading that right?
Right, there's no direct link. As I understand it, if I want to make clarification from Nicole, so as I understand it, if we get money from the friends, we pay for it first and then they reimburse us, is that correct?
That's usually how it works.
Okay, so if that's the case, but it's still, the money's still coming out from us. And if the money's coming out from us first, and it's looking like a public works project, then it's public funds are being used. Even though we may get reimbursed, it's still, everything's prevailing wage. So if you wanted to do a job, we're still trying to find some, we're still talking to lawyers, and I have to talk to them this week, where we can see if we do project by project, if some can be done with private funding, but it's a very tight window, so we have to get very much better clarification from that. But as of now, it looks like everything is prevailing wage job.
Well, I don't know if that shoots down the, oh, I'm sorry, another comment from Mark.
Mark Mariscal, I did have 10 or I had 10 all, but I'll just say this, and having Christine in the room would be really good for you to go back and ask BBK, but I will tell you from my at least last 20 years of senior management in the city of LA, when a friends group of the library or the friends group of parks actually found like the Parks Foundation or the Library Foundation actually raise the money and totally pay for a project, they then the spirit of it is they probably should use prevailing wage, but they don't need to do it. But they do need to follow still all of the applicable laws for companies that have their business license, their insurances, all the typical things that you as an entity would ask any contractor to have, you would have to do that. The part of labor is probably the part that could change, but that's only if, and kind of Jonathan said, where you took a very specific amount, very small thing, like we were talking about painting the branch maybe with foundation money. And so if we went out and solicited bids as a foundation and then came to the board and said, this is the donation we want to give to you and you would accept that, then we possibly could go forward. But I do think you should have further discussion on that. I'll just tell you from 20 years of that kind of working with the couple foundations that I worked with, they did it often where they could go do it. The issue with the current Altadena Library Foundation is that we don't have $350,000 that we're going to allocate directly to a construction project right now to do that. But again, the painting of the branch maybe might do it, or laying carpet or something in the amounts that we have allocated at different times and or could allocate, we possibly could do it. But I do think it's wise to ask. But I do know that there are many government entities that work with their partner groups that then allow them to do it as a completed project that is then a donation as whole. So, something to think about.
And most of the people that we have to do, that we won't do public works projects, they have to have a DIR number, which is a Department of Industrial Relations number. And so that's how that falls in that category. But as I said earlier, we were talking with BB&K and talking to them, to their lawyer specifically about, how can we do this? And if we get public funding, or private funding for certain projects. But as he said, if we start off with one project that is prevailing wage, then the whole area becomes prevailing wage. So we're trying to figure out what to do there. So, but we're getting more information from the lawyer, and we'll have an answer for you hopefully by next month.
Okay. The genesis of my suggesting this was the sitting in the meetings with the foundation and them having amounts of money that they like to donate to a particular project. And I thought, well, gee, there's a synergy there if it's being directed toward something that could help with the ADA deal. And for me, and I think I might be talking for other members of the board, I'll let you pipe in here. We've heard a lot from the community during the campaign and just in public comment and so on about the progress of our ADA compliance. And I've said this many times in different meetings, and that is that California is just a slap-happy ADA lawsuit state. 25% of all the lawsuits filed in the country happen in California. And so we're low-hanging fruit for that sort of thing. And as I look back at older documents and see that we haven't really made all that much progress in that department, I'm just trying to figure out a way that we could speed it up. So maybe my little homegrown mechanism isn't the right way to go. So I guess I'll let you speak to that.
And I'm sorry, no, I'm fully encouraged that. I just wanted to start letting you know some of these laws that we're becoming aware of that may possibly impact where we take our funding from for some of these projects that we know we want to move ahead with.
So I think everybody on here tonight on the board would agree that we should, as much as possible, be attending, whether it's the foundation meetings, any kind of important staff meetings. But I think specific to the board issue, considering we've got this massive multi-million-dollar backlog that we've got to deal with, building it into the strategic plan, I would just propose a motion that we reconstitute the standing building committee starting in January. We can take, if we need to put it on the agenda, if we can do it tonight, take nominations for that. And the reason being is, as a standing committee, I think as has been pointed out, it would be subject to the Brown Act requirement. And I think considering just how much money is going to be involved in the proposals coming out of that committee and the impact on the strategic plan, I think it's critical that it be a committee that is subject to Brown Act requirements.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think that, we're in kind of an unusual situation right now where all the staff of the library are doing 18 13 jobs at once and doing them very well, I think. But certainly, you know, the role of the board is to interface with the director and to not get too involved in individual sort of staff scopes of work. So I think having it set up as a committee that meets, you know, within its own remit and has its own job, and then can have the interim director or whoever is in that position come in and work with that committee is probably the best structure.
Can I suggest that, because, I mean, the agenda item we're on right now, 10E, is committee's constitution and membership, and it may be that we can construct at least beginnings of committee membership tonight, perhaps in one motion, rather than to do a single motion about every single committee. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd suggest we name a chair for each committee, and then people can we can add people on sort of work out in style if we need to, but I think that might clarify a little bit.
Okay. So back to my list. So facilities. So it sounds like we have kind of two ideas about facilities right now. One is to have it be a standing committee, and one is have a liaison to the staff committee.
I mean, I almost think it's, I really think it's both. Right, I don't know if we're not talking about like amending the bylaws to require a liaison, but I think it makes perfect sense to.
Well, in a sense, does it make more sense to have a board liaison, I'm thinking out loud here, sorry, a board liaison to the facilities or building committee, or consider that the interim director is the liaison to the board committee to let us know what's happening on the staff committee? Because I'm thinking about Katie's comment that we do have to be careful not to dabble where we don't belong.
Jonathan actually asked me about this last week, and I mean, you guys can do it however. I think though that if you were to have a facilities committee or building committee and with 2 board members, that committee could say, you know, board member A can go to the meeting of the staff committee if they, you know, if there's a specific meeting, just like you would with a staff meeting, like staff association. Terry attended that as part of the board, not as part of the committee. The other option is inviting members of that staff to your committee meetings, if there's something specific that they're working on, or, you know, I think it's a given that the director would be a part of that, but if you wanted to then invite staff. Just another one of my suggestions, and I talked to Stella about this, is that bringing back in January, and I think Katie mentioned this, maybe a resolution, if you do decide to create that facilities committee, a resolution, and I'm sure Christine will help with that, really specifying the, you know, membership, the
scope of work.
Yeah, the scope of work,
right.
if there's a timeline or what they expect to do. I think that, because that, from what I found, which was nothing, that hasn't really been done in the past, but I was looking at other special districts and the way they create their committees, and, you know, a resolution that specifies those things, I think would be really helpful for you guys and for future boards.
Well, maybe a good place to start would be just to look at what, kind of prioritize the committees that we'd like to get going. Everybody's talking about a bylaws committee. There's a strategic planning session that needs to happen right away. I don't, I guess, feel the need to try to jumpstart a facilities thing tonight at this meeting, but maybe give that a little bit more thought and table it until the next meeting. But I do think there's some assignments, which is what this is about, right? About getting these other committees going. So are there thoughts from especially from the new board members, about which committees you view to be the most important right now?
or that you'd like to serve on.
Or yes, all right, and if you speak, or exactly. There you serve.
I think there are some vacancies now, like on the budget committee, for example, it was, I think
Myself and
Ira.
Ira.
Yeah, so those I would definitely maybe focus on first, the committees that you already have, I think that may be the only one, where there's now a vacancy, I think that is important.
Can I just say, again, in speaking to Gwen, who was the chair of the bylaws committee, is the chair of the bylaws committee, that she would very much like to see that through. I was also on that committee, but I would happily defer to anybody else who's interested in bylaws. I know Katie is, to join her to finish that.
Yeah, that'd be great,
process.
thank you.
Okay.
I mean, I think clearly the number one priority, because the rest of this falls within it, is the strategic planning. I mean, we're already 6 months behind or whatever it may be, so.
That technically expires next year, but you're right.
I mean, it's gonna take an
an
obscene amount of work to recreate a new one, so.
I agree.
And
with that.
obviously I'm willing to be part of that, so.
And I, of course, would very much like to be intensely involved in the strategic planning committee. I do think that there's a lot of organization that needs to happen there. So I agree that's gonna take some doing, and it's really important that we allow for as much participation publicly as possible in that committee, which is gonna be different from something like budget or bylaws, which will of course be open to the public presumably, but not necessarily reaching out in as sustained a way as the strategic planning committee ought to, in my opinion.
So these committees are really shaping up right away, which is great. So Katie has proposed to join the bylaws committee,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And Jason and Katie for the strategic planning. And then I heard budget a little while ago, right, then who's on that committee now?
I'm on
It
it.
was Betsy and Ira, so there's now a vacancy on that committee.
I'll stay on it, but I would also like to participate in the search.
Okay.
So those would be my two.
Did you say search committee? Okay. And I agree with both of those. I think that I could be of some assistance in the budget committee, so I'm happy to join that. And search, I'm happy to get involved in that too.
Okay.
So there's, I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Without going way over there, but your bylaws committee, I was serving on there, so I don't know if you want that still to continue, but just, you can decide that later, but I don't know exactly what the right process is. But
I'm guessing that the bylaws committee may not have been constituted properly in the first place. Like, I don't know if there was a specific scope and remit and timeline and all of that, but I think we should do that by resolution in January, so certainly, yes.
These are all ad hoc committees we're talking about, right? Except
Special, yeah.
except perhaps for the budget committee. I'm sorry, go ahead, Christine.
I thought I heard 2 or 3 that were standing. What were they, Beth?
The budget.
And facilities or building, which sounds like maybe we're deferring.
I'm just thinking if we tackle the main ones tonight and cogitate on facilities a little bit more, and then we could bring that up to the next meeting. That's just my idea, so I'll give the suggestions on that.
I mean, is the building committee, is that a standing committee currently in the bylaws?
No, there
No?
are no standing committees.
Okay, so we would need to
specified in the
deal with
bylaws.
that in a motion in January, okay. I would just, I mean, if we are gonna do a motion to fill all these special committees, I would just, as part of that, include placing the building committee on the agenda for the January meeting then.
There's a place on the agenda for that.
Okay.
So-
Newbies, man, we're taking up all the time, right?
Oh, cool.
That's good. So we're talking 4 committees now, do I have that right? And I wonder if we should just break this up into individual motions. Kylan, what would be your suggestion?
If I may, maybe one way to handle it would be to move that we have, a resolution on the January agenda brought forward by each of the committees defining their scope of work, their timeline, their membership, and their duties as they understand it, and then we can vote on those in January. And in,
On the special committees.
on those 4 special committees. I mean, budget committee already exists.
Right.
So I guess the other 3.
And facilities would already exist as well, right? Would be, facilities is a standing committee, right? Yeah.
Right, but there's no current resolution or current board members on that committee. And I don't know what, how long a committee has to be dormant or not, not having meetings to even be considered.
If we want to include that in Katie's idea, as far as coming to January with specific proposals of each of the committees, at least for the time being, I'd be more than willing to do that for the building committee, so it can be considered.
To bring a scope and.
Yeah, just a proposal for us to consider as far as the scope, how long it should meet, what it should address, etc.
So do we need an action item that names committee members right now to those that have volunteered, or is this something that we can table this whole thing until January?
Christine has
Just to make a suggestion, so you can make a motion to create the ad hoc committee. And you can designate and decide how you'd like the ad hoc committee to be staffed. So if you're looking for members of the community to participate, if you'd like it to be just board members, if you'd like it to be a combination, whatever you'd like, just designate how you'd like the membership to be formed. And that way people can let you know if they want to be part of the ad hoc committee. And then make it a point at the next meeting, maybe as new business, to look at the full scope and anything that the ad hoc committee is responsible for. But the ad hoc, it's really clear at the formation what the ad hoc committee is responsible for and how membership is going to be developed. That's what, so that is part of your motion. Just make that part of the motion so it's clear what you're creating and why and who's going to be a part of it, so that you know how to accept membership from either you, staff, or the community, from the community, from staff, or from the board.
So they would do that individually then for
Each ad hoc committee, depending on how you like the structure.
So if I'm, go ahead, Katie, you have some?
I was just gonna say, for the search committee, the budget committee, as far as I'm aware, those are internal, correct? They're not seeking membership from members of the public, or is that incorrect?
I raised my hand for the search committee, and I honestly would like to study that before I suggest what a committee constitution would be.
In the past, it has been
Outside, yeah, that's what I would like to study.
Yeah, okay.
We could form that committee of board members right now, though, right? If we wanted to, the search committee.
I mean, I think what Christine is saying is that before you move to create that committee, you should know or have an idea to specify whether or not it's going to be solely board members or, right? Or you're gonna open up, so.
Part of what you're trying to do is make sure you're meeting the terms and the requirements of an ad hoc committee versus a standing committee. So in order for you to satisfy the requirements of an ad hoc committee, you need to be clear that that's, you're setting your time frame, because you're right now talking about a search committee, which is probably an ad hoc committee, versus a budget committee, which is probably not. So you want to differentiate those and know exactly whether or not you're forming a standing committee or an ad hoc committee, and what the membership will be comprised of.
In the search committee, when you think about it, is getting the horse before the cart before the horse a little bit, because we're not even done with the interim search committee. So I'm having trouble with this in terms of what kind of motion to propose, but it sounds as if we are taking the whole thing and kicking the can until January with a motion, I guess, for a resolution that we will be forming these different committees, and that the details of this will be made, suggested to everybody at the next meeting on the 28th.
And maybe just another suggestion, one of the ways, if you really are struggling with what you'd like membership to look like, but you'd like to form the committee, I think one of the things Jason just suggested, maybe appointing a chair to those committees, a board chair, and then maybe you come back with a proposal in January and allow for the public to comment on those things. Like, and if you're creating a committee that, let's say you want the search committee to be just made of board members, but there's community that would like to be a part, you give them an opportunity, and you notice it, give them an opportunity to voice that proposal, have voice to that proposal.
And they could be individual items on that January agenda. That way you're having that individual discussion about each committee.
So when is the chair of the bylaws committee? So we can,
She needs to be here, I think.
yeah. I mean,
Katie's simply becoming the second member of the bylaws committee, right?
Yeah.
you took the gavel, so I'll be I'll be chair of the search committee if you want. You and I are on that committee, right?
Yes.
Or, so
Although
I'll take responsibility.
Okay, and I still think that's something we need to talk about in January when we're a little closer to actually having that instated. So, is there, I mean, do we make a resolution that says that we've got several committees that need to be structured?
You mean right now?
Yeah.
Right now, you're making, what I'm suggesting is that potentially consider motions to create the committees that you're trying to create and maybe appoint a chair, and task that chair with coming back to the next meeting with a proposal for the full scope membership type plan for the committee.
Okay.
Because there seems to be some lack of consensus about that.
So if we do this one at a time, starting with the bylaws committee,
It's a currently existing committee. Katie's volunteering or voluntold to fill the vacancy. I don't know, do we need a resolution on that one, or can we just
No,
address the other four?
We just need a motion to appoint me to that committee.
Right.
And then we can move on.
Well, then I would make a motion to appoint Katie to fill the vacancy on the budget committee. Bylaws, sorry, bylaws.
I'll second that.
okay? So we have a motion to appoint Katie as the second member of the bylaws committee. No more comment? Okay, can I get a vote then by raising your hand and saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. The next committee then would be the strategic planning committee. And we've got 2 volunteers for that,
I'm happy to chair that.
okay? So the motion would be to, are we reforming this or just forming the strategic planning
So
committee?
the motion would be to have me return with a resolution outlining the specifics of that committee as an ad hoc committee, its membership, its scope of work, and its timeline for the January meeting, with a resolution in the board packet that we could talk about and we could have a conversation about that.
Did you get all that, Kylie?
I will watch the video. No, but I do want to say that I can help. I have multiple samples of, special districts, and I know that you guys are available. Well, they can resolution specifically, but if you do need help with that,
Yeah,
I'm available.
that'd be cool, thanks.
Could you repeat that?
Sure, so I'm moving that I come back to the January meeting with, all the specifics of an ad hoc strategic planning committee in resolution form that we can then discuss and vote on.
I will second.
Right. All in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
No, nobody yet, so I'm just gonna come back with a resolution and then we'll constitute it in January.
So we've got strategic planning, we've got bylaws. We're not making any motion yet on the facilities committee, right? That's something that we want to table until next time.
and if you wanna do exactly the same thing and come back
Yeah, I mean,
to January with a resolution outlining.
I'm willing to do what Katie's doing on strategic, but do it for the building committee.
Okay, so I missed that, then you volunteered to chair that
Sure.
committee then? Okay, good. So, we have that duplicate motion for the facilities committee.
Second.
Who moved? Who moved?
Yeah, we didn't get to it yet.
I think
We didn't-
Terry made the motion, Katie seconded.
Right, I did make the motion then. Okay, good. So, can I get a vote, all in favor? Aye, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Can I say ditto on the search committee?
Okay,
With Betsy as chair?
you made the motion then?
Yes.
Okay. The second? Okay. Katie's making the second, and I'll get a vote. Raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and I think that covers all the committees.
Except budget.
On the budget, which you.
Oh, yeah, that's right, okay.
I nominate Terry to fill the vacancy on the budget committee.
Second.
Right, you vote, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Good.
Look at all that work.
I spent too much time on that, but we got a good conversation then.
Sorry, who's the chair of the budget committee? That's still you?
It wasn't me.
Oh,
No, we had a chair, I don't remember.
I don't believe there was a chair, so you,
probably should be one.
What does that mean? Should we, I'm happy to be the chair of the budget committee.
I think for consistency, since we
Okay.
don't have any chairs on each of
Can
these
we
committees.
just add that into the motion then, Eileen, would that be okay? All right. Unless are there any speakers before the closed session?
Well, we moved number 15 to this place that we've never looked at.
Oh, that's
Board
right,
of
yeah.
Trustees, so.
I apologize. Before you finish 10E, you might still want to consider, you don't have to do it tonight, but a liaison to the Friends and a liaison to the Foundation. You currently are the liaison to the Foundation, and Armando is the liaison to the Friends. I will tell you, we didn't see Armando all year, but we did see you at the Foundation. So if you want to talk about it tonight, if not, come back in January, but we would love to have a liaison to those two organizations.
I didn't know that the liaisons have the same kind of calendar rhythm to it.
They
I
don't,
just
it
assumed
just-
I would keep going on.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean, it just, yeah,
okay,
So there's a missing one.
there is a missing one.
okay.
That would be a good
Yeah,
agenda
let's
item
add
for
that.
January.
There's a lot of committee commitment going on here, so we should probably think about that. All right, we did want to move up some items. We had a request for that before.
So there's no public comment on reports. Yeah, so 15 is moved up. And there's no public comment.
Okay. So, that brings us to, there's no public comment on this item number 15. It's going to go before the closed session. So, we have any reports from the trustees?
So just a real quick thing from me. I think like many of you guys had the opportunity to be at the Christmas tree lane lighting on,
Saturday.
Thank you. I'm like, what day is it? I don't know. On Saturday. And I certainly wanted to thank everybody who made that a big success. And one thing that I heard consistently among people that were in the crowd was how happy they were to be at the library and how excited they were to see the library as a big part of that event. And certainly it's going to be a bigger thing next year and the year after as we approach the 100th anniversary. So one thing that I started thinking about was how we might be able to kind of converge some of the goals that we have as an institution of getting in front of more people and connecting people to really cool experiences and ideas when we happen to have thousands of folks literally in our backyard for a night. So whether that's no, we're good. So just as sort of a seed for the future, I'd love to hear us, kind of think about that and think about what we might be able to do as a way of engaging, especially kids who are gonna show up over the next 2 years.
Anyone else? I've got an item, and Christine, I'm looking at you for this one, because I'd like to give a little overview on our legal bills. And I don't want to get into a point where I'm getting some trouble with the attorney-client privilege, so if I get in the weeds too much on this, if you could just let me know, I'd appreciate it. A meeting or two ago, the subject of legal fees came up, and it continues to be sort of the elephant in the room. Those of you that read the packet see that we're 475%, I think, over our legal fee budget already for the year. So, and I think we all know there's been a lot of legal activity going on. I took the opportunity with Stella's help to take a look at all the bills that we've gotten from BB&K, which is the firm that's representing us now. And I found those to be in really good order. The firm is billing us prudently. I don't see any overages, any charges that are inappropriate. They're billing us in the 1/10 of an hour increment, which is pretty small, 6-minute increments, and they've broken it down well. There's a description of everything that they've done, and the work is being spread throughout the firm in a way that makes it the most cost-effective to us. Paralegals are getting involved, other associate attorneys, partner attorneys, all doing the appropriate job and all billing the appropriate rates. One thing that Betsy had mentioned before is that a lot of the fees that a lot of the hours, I should say, that we've incurred from BB&K have to do with Public Records Act and pulling them and redacting them and getting to the parties and so on. There's a lot of processing that goes on there. Almost 40% of the hours spent these last few months, and I should caution that I haven't gone through every single bill. There's still a couple of bills I need to go through, but I've gone through most of them. Have been involved with that type of an activity. So obviously, as things, we hope, wind down in the legal department, we're going to see a return to normal, but in my estimation, having looked at the bills, BB&K has done a good job for us, and I don't think the public should be worried about what's described as exorbitant fees and so on occasionally at the podium. But that's my report. Right, with that, then, we're going to adjourn to a closed session here at,
You got some public comment?
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So, okay, Mr. Gronemeyer, you can come forward.
So Dale Gronemeyer again, and Jason Capel's question to BB&K attorney Christine Wood shortcuts much of what I wanted to say because Ms. Woods admits that this is not a response to the cease and desist letter. It clearly isn't. It's a partial one. It does some of the things that a cease and desist letter would do, but it is not a cease and desist letter response. The $100,000 question is, why isn't it a response to a cease and desist letter, and why were there not 3 timely cease and desist response letters? Because that has cost about $100,000, roughly, in the settlement that is being paid. So I want to spend this time to go through the structure of Section 54-960.2 of the Brown Act that I've circulated, and it provides a mechanism for determining whether past actions of the library violated the Brown Act. Section A provides what Mindy McKay had to do to raise those issues. We did that. Section B provides that the library may, within 30 days, essentially eliminate any exposure for attorney's fees. It may eliminate exposure for attorney's fees by doing what it has now done fully, not partially, that is, by giving a unconditional commitment to not do any of the things again. It has to go through all of the steps that are set out in Section C, which has not been done. But the question is, why didn't that happen when Mindy Katay, or I on her behalf, sent 3 cease and desist letters, all of which 3 of the current board members were on and could have responded to and eliminated any exposure for attorney's fees by doing so. That failure to do so, as far as I can tell, had to be either because the board was properly advised that it could eliminate exposure for attorney's fees but did not do so, or they were not advised by their attorneys that they could do this. And in our calculation for settlement, this has been a major factor because what has happened is that it has locked in, if we were to continue litigation, it's being settled, so it's now moved. But you are paying about $100,000 more because you did not send out 3 responses to cease and desist letters on a timely basis. The public is entitled to know whether that's because the board refused to take legal advice or because the board did not get competent legal advice, and I don't know which it was. Thank you.
Thanks. And Mark, you're up next, please.
Mark Mariscal, totally private citizen on this one. Really going back to what you said, Terry, a little bit about the legal fees, and I'll just say that I don't think they're going to get back to normal, because normal average, $20,000 a year. I would think that this board should consider, if not at every meeting, at least at every other meeting, having an attorney at its board meeting. You're a legal entity, a legal government entity. And what that would mean, though, is actually putting in your budget enough money to do that. And you could do that in next fiscal year. You're already going to move a bunch of money, most likely, in the mid-year adjustment in order to deal with what all the fees are now. But to go back to normal, or what was being averaged of $10,000, $20,000, Nicole could tell you, it's not going to be the way going forward. And there's the idea that Christine can actually respond to some of your questions on the spot to make sure that certain things aren't occurring, which would save you some money in the long run, is probably a good investment of that extra $30,000 or $40,000 you need to budget next year on top of the 20. So it will be a higher level, but again, the idea, similar to what I've said about the property taxes going up and the per parcel going up by cost of living, gives almost this sort of automatic room. And I will tell you that this year, I don't know, Nicole hasn't totally done it, but we'll see it in the report next month from the auditors, is that the increase was somewhere in the $110,000, $120,000 range, and if that's the case, it's most likely going to be in that same range again. I think the county was predicting 6%, and on 2.8 million or 2.6 million that are part of the property tax dollars that come in from the 2 sources, that 6% is going to generate $160,000. So to be thinking about the idea that your legal fees next year, they will not go back down to the levels that they were over some years, but that's okay, and I think the public will understand that as long as it's stated up front, and that you guys decide that you want to have legal counsel every meeting or every other meeting, or maybe for the first 6 meetings of your new year, and then you can see where it is from there. But it truly is worth its dollars. Although what Dale did say of where maybe the last board, didn't quite the last other trustees, I know the 2 of you were on it, but really even before, where they might not have taken some of the advice early on, is what's costing the extra money, and not a whole lot we can do about it now except pay the bills, unfortunately.
Thanks, Mark. And if I may offer a follow-up to your comment, Mark, that is that same analysis that I did of the legal fees that we paid. I also broke out the hours that were spent by attorneys to cover us at the meetings here, and that's a very, very small amount in the overall bill that we had. So I think that's a good idea. All right, with that, there's no more speakers. So, okay, I'm sorry, Katie has a comment.
Just one quick thing before we adjourn into closed session. If you've looked at the agenda, you know that there are a lot of things on there and it's pretty lengthy, so I just wanted to say for anybody who doesn't stick around through what will be a long intermission, thank you for sticking with us this year. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for your patience, and happy holidays.
Excuse me, Terry, may I say one thing? In honor of tonight's special, not regular meeting, but special event of having our ceremonial swearing in, we have provided you with some beverages and cookies, so please enjoy.
And that probably tastes better than Renee.
Thank you. So, with that, I'd like to adjourn into our closed session at 7:04.
Are you guys going upstairs?
We're back in session here at 9:40. And coming out of closed session, on item A, conference with legal counsel regarding litigation. There's nothing really new to report there. It's ongoing, but we did brief the new members on all the existing litigation and any potential settlement that might be out there. We got that done. And then a public employee appointment. We, Betsy and I have finished our search for an interim candidate and found one and have recommended that person to the board. We're not releasing her name quite yet until we get through some more items regarding negotiation with her. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that she's a retired annuitant, and we've got some forms and things to make sure we get done. And then on item C, there's really nothing to report on that either. So, that's our closed session business. And now we've got item 15. Well, actually, are we doing that? Okay. So, really, the last item here is going to be agenda items for future meetings, right? And does anybody have anything for that?
I've got one that I sent in for this month that we tabled to next month, which is just an agenda item. It's very meta. It's an agenda item about agendas. Requesting that we take a look at some best practices on how to structure our agendas and maybe do that in a way that is a little bit more consistent with some other similar institutions. So I'm requesting that that go on the January regular meeting agenda.
And not really an agenda item, but so I will be at the ALA convention in Seattle for that Monday. So I wanted to see if there's a way to conference in, or like if that's been done, if there's a mechanism for that, or if I'm gonna have to miss the meeting.
There is a method that's prescribed in the bylaws for calling in. I can't remember what it is.
We haven't done it.
Jason, I do know one thing you would have to do is you would have to officially post the meeting somewhere.
Yeah, the agenda would have to be posted, the agenda would have to be posted at the location where you're planning to call in from, and then that location would just have to be open to the public, and meet ADA requirements. But I'm sure Christine could clarify that, but that's what I know of as far as the posting requirements. There may be other specific limitations during the meeting, but I'm not sure exactly at this point what those are. And that has not been done since I've been here, so I don't know, I haven't been through that.
If you look at section, oh shoot, sorry. It's section, the special meetings section basically, it's all in the meeting section. It's number 5. There's a teleconference thing, and it says, we're not gonna do it, we don't like it, except in extraordinary circumstances, which includes when you're 50 miles or more from the meeting site, which seems like Seattle would qualify. Upon request by a board member, subject to approval by the board chair and written confirmation that all conditions required in the Brown Act are met, which is what Kyla was just saying. So it sounds like you would just need to get approval from the board chair, and then there would have to be some kind of written guarantee that everything was compliant with Brown Act requirements.
Right, thank you. And then one final thing I forgot to report out from our closed session. It's likely that we'll have a special meeting between now and the next one on the 28th of January. We'll let folks know when that is.
Could I just say one thing about the agenda for the next meeting, just as a reminder, that from then on, for a while anyway, we're gonna have that regular Brown Act refresher on the agenda every time.
Is that the meeting that's starting to be on the agenda? Okay. And then I also have the liaison to the
And all the committee resolution stuff.
All right, so with that, I'd ask for a motion to, go ahead.
Sorry, quick question about 14, because I don't think you mentioned it at all. Is that item being tabled or just not, there's no action on it? It wasn't mentioned at all, so I worry about.
Yeah, in a sense, we're tabling that because we would make that part of our
Depending on-
negotiating package with the new candidate that we have. All right, can I get a motion to adjourn then?
Motion to adjourn?
A second?
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.